This Pitch Breakfast video is brought to you by Spangler & Agins, attorneys for Charlotte's startup community.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be here today. I want you to take a trip with me. I want you to think about the last time you went to a place that you were not familiar with. Close your eyes if it helps. I want you to think about the things you wanted to see. I want you to think about the things you wanted to hear and the things you wanted to feel, right? These are the experiences that we look for every day. We look for them in our own backyard. We look for them when we go to new places. Let me tell you about some of the things you probably felt or you probably thought of. As a consumer, you probably wanted to be engaged beyond just a list, right? You wanted to have authentic experiences, something that you could only get at that place. You wanted to feel connected to the place, and that connection can't be shallow. It has to be deep, and it has to be meaningful. But you probably encountered a problem while you were doing that. The problem was that you saw something like this, which is in every hotel lobby across America. You saw an old brochure rack. And so tourist destinations, the places that you're going to, struggle to provide that in-depth, meaningful connection. They struggle to provide that engagement beyond lists because they're using old technology. They have a hard time getting beyond just print, right? And oftentimes they lack the talent to compete and to create a really meaningful, really engaging solution in a new area. But you know who the real loser is in this scenario? Is the small town businesses all across America. It's these destinations that have unique stories to tell and that are special. They have things that are different about them. They have heritage, they have legacy. They're third and fourth and fifth generation shop owners perhaps, and they have to deliver their experience in context, but they're not able to tell their story because the infrastructure that they're participating in doesn't provide that context. So this is where UGoTour comes in, and this is what UGoTour is. We connect people, places, and stories by providing virtual experiences from local storytellers on our mobile tour guide platform. And let me tell you a little bit about how we do this. First of all, we take a local shop owner. This is Brant Barnes from Riverwood Pottery in Dillsboro, North Carolina. He's a potter. He's been potting and creating art for 40 years. We interview Brant and we curate his story into what we call a story point. We get a professional narrator who tells a story. We intersperse that with some of Brant's comments, and then we add professional music to create an immersive audio experience similar to what you would expect to hear on a podcast. And then we put that on our mobile platform, which we can then use those story points and organize those into tours so that you can have an experience. You can go and find all the potters in an area. You can find all the brewers in an area. And you can go from place to place and meet all the different people who would tell you things that are important and meaningful to you, and you will build these connections. Let me tell you a little bit about the platform that we deliver this service on. There's three major components. One, we know that people are looking for this connection when they're making decisions on where to go. So we make that content available on a website. And this allows us to attract people who are planning visits and to really engage a customer so that they look forward to going to the places that they're moving towards. We put signs in the actual locations with SMS adoption codes so that if you're standing somewhere, you can actually text a certain code and get adoption in the moment. It's the best way and the fastest way for us to earn new customers. And then you can download the mobile app free on either the iOS or the Android platform, and you can get access to special features like navigation, downloaded content, and favorites. Okay? So here are some of the results. What we find is that when people use UGoTour, they're 80% more likely to be fully engaged. Harvard Business Review said that those fully engaged customers are 52% more valuable. We see a 30 to 50% increase on key performance indicators and up to a 10x return on investment for our paying customers. Our revenue model involves us charging chambers and TDA, so it's free to the user, absolutely free, no advertising. Our local organizations pay a platform fee on a recurring basis, and our local destinations pay a development fee and also a recurring fee to maintain their status on the platform. There are many, many additional opportunities for us to monetize this model going forward, including big data and co-branded advertising. In the tech travel industry, hot industry, $5 billion in investment in 2015 and approximately 348 deals. Some of our competitors like to focus on non-curated content or don't have a local presence. They just focus on London and New York. There's a massive market for us to introduce ourselves to by going rural, okay? Our team, which is led by me, I built programs for eBay, and we have a technology founder and a creative director who helps direct our content, and we're looking to grow 5x and eventually achieve a $100 million valuation in 2021. And that's the last slide.
Thank you, Paul.
All right.
Steve, you look ready.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to ask me for money. Is that the last slide? Because it was an investor pitch, right?
That's right.
So like market size, problem, market size, competition. How are we going to disrupt? How much do I need? Use of proceeds are like the first things I want to hear if you're asking me for money. If you're doing a business, like it was good. I like the business side of it. I actually think it's an interesting idea. I kind of scribbled down that it's a, kind of Made Close. If you're familiar with Made Close online, check them out. Okay. Pokemon and Google search kind of had a baby.
Right.
Right? So you got like the geolocation stuff. You got people generally search. I'm missing I'm wondering about social because whenever I want to go somewhere, the first thing I do is ask somebody I know who's been there.
Right.
So there's some parts that I'd like to see built in that would make it an interesting value proposition. So, but the money part, just in terms of the context of the pitch and the feedback is, I want to see some of those very standard kind of fundraising type elements in the pitch. And then obviously if you have more time, you can get into product and business and that kind of thing.
Up front specifically.
Up front, yeah.
Up front, that's helpful. Great.
Same thing, I want to hear a little bit more about you as well. So you kind of got to that at the very end. So it's like, what are you asking for? Tell me about you. Why should I listen? I mean, you got to get our attention as investors.
Great.
And then I love the idea of curated in content and local and experiences. I just love that as a consumer. As an investor, I think about, what's that going to cost? Is that scalable?
Right.
So I want you to answer that question for me because I still have that question. And so maybe you can answer it now.
Great. Scalability is actually, you hit the nose on the head, right? So that's the paradigm. Either you're getting curated content or you're getting crowdsourced content, lower quality, but faster to get, right? So we're attacking the curated content method a number of different ways. First of all, we're experienced building virtual teams. So part of my experience with EBO is actually building distributed workforces across call center campaigns that didn't actually, people work from their home. Mm-hmm. So our first step is to distribute the talent pool so we don't have to have people in our area. The second step to that is being able to develop a format which we have refined very, very aggressively over the last 6 months so that we can actually have other people curate our content, such as agencies. A lot of our customers, our destination marketing organizations, have an agency that they pay to help make these decisions for them. Those agencies become content providers. They can follow the template, if you will, and develop content for us. But there's a third place that's really exciting, and that is self-developed content where we can actually potentially train a user and have them. We actually did some tests with this on a recent campaign a few months ago. We had people leave us 30-second voicemail messages, and we popped those voicemail messages into our system. And people, there was a lower quality, but we found that we were able to orient the experience enough to get it specific and have it be very relevant. And that's really what drives authenticity and a genuine experience is relevancy, right? If it matters to me and it's speaking to me at the right time in the right place, then sometimes even the content quality is a little less important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you go back to that slide where you have where you are right now, so 10,000 users, and
that's right.
That's the consumers.
Yes.
And then the
Yeah,
businesses.
app downloads specifically, right?
App downloads, and then businesses. How many do you have?
Well, so let me talk about app downloads really quick. We've actually quickly identified that app downloads are a poor way to measure our engagement, because our engagement actually, the aha moment for people using UGoTour is when they hear a story. It's the story that builds the connection, and that story can be delivered through the app, but it can also be delivered through the web, or it can be delivered on their own website, or it can be delivered on social media.
Yeah, that's super important because that's the other part of Christy's scale question is I get the part of curating content on scale in a distributed sense, that makes sense, but there's still a massive customer acquisition thing that has to happen. If you want to charge a small store owner what looked like $7,500 year one, maybe $2,500 year two to drive traffic essentially to their outlet, you've got to have scale, right? And so I wanted to hear how else are you going to distribute these stories while you're waiting to build critical mass? Because otherwise you're caught in that constant, kind of catch-22 that people have, which is like, I don't have any base, so it's hard for me to sell.
We're familiar with that. Yeah. Well, so one of the ways we've found to engage customers, it's the SMS adoption, right? So we find that being able to show somebody, so we actually have in Halifax County, does anybody know where Halifax County is?
I do.
Okay, so they're telling a fantastic story there about the Underground Railroad. And the thing that's unique about the Underground Railroad is that there are no landmarks. It's all imagination. So we actually have worked with them to curate some stories, and we have signs that are put there. We've been testing with them and developing some content and then testing elsewhere. If we say to people, hey, download this app and get an experience, people are like, download an app. I've heard that before, right? But if we say text URR1 to 82257, which by the way, you could actually do that right now, you get a link that takes them directly to a story, and that is 5 to 10 times more powerful and more, people adopt that more often than an app download. So it's about getting them relevant content as fast as possible in a way that they're familiar with and getting them into that experience, right? So that's how we increase the user adoption there.
Yeah. There's also sorry, Garth, you have
No,
something?
no, go ahead.
There's also a point of need thing, right? Like your first slide is kind of interesting. You got all those brochures, but it's also the baggage pickup at the airport or coming downstairs to a hotel is a point of need thing. That information is there. Maybe it's old school, but it's there because it's exactly in the right place when somebody's walking out the door and looking for something to do. I think I keep coming back to this notion of distribution and getting content in the right place on scale in the local community is one thing, but I have to imagine that most of this starts with the web.
Yes.
And so I would, in order to look at use of proceeds and investment, I would want to see exactly what the distribution strategy is and how investment dollars are going to go to establishing a distribution channel that's scalable, that is cost effective, that makes sense. Because I think until you tackle that distribution problem, the rest of it makes perfect sense. I think people want that content. I love to see beautiful stories. It absolutely sells. I think shop owners want their story told. Like all that is good for me. I still am trying to figure out exactly how distribution happens in a way that's scalable and cost effective. I'd like to see more of that in the pitch side.
Sure, thank you. That's good information.
Audience, how about you? Patty?
Well, I probably can't articulate this thought properly, but I'll just throw it out there. When you talked about the storytelling, it reminds me of things they do on public radio. And so if there were a way to partner with public radio across the country, and because they can't advertise.
Right.
And so they do sponsorships. So there's a way you could kind of connect what you're doing with the public radio, like the StoryCorps, but have, because local stories here, we love to hear about brewers and all of that. So, I don't know, there's just a way that you could perhaps merge some, just
Right.
collaborate.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. So StoryCorps is actually, the driver of this growth is strategic partners. Which also speaks to our scalability. So StoryCorps is actually somebody we have a dialogue with right now about putting some of their content in place, right, and having it be relevant to people at a specific point in time, which we think is important. We're also, the Department of Transportation, the North Carolina Department of Transportation has 60 scenic byways. We participated in a pilot program last year to put the first 6 byways in the western part of the state where Asheville is located. We now have an arrangement to do the rest of the 60 scenic byways, which is really the driver of the 2017 growth. So we have the opportunity to do some private-public partnership and drive some of those stories. Arcadia Publishing, which some of you guys may know about if you've done tourism, they're another strategic partner that we're working with. So I like where you're headed is strategic partnerships and access to large databases of content that we can then leverage perhaps very quickly. We think that's important.
Yes, sir.
What are your plans to expand globally to countries that might be underdeveloped but have a very high volume of tourism?
It's a great question. That same plan really gets executed first here locally because we have a lot of, tourism development is now economic development. In most drivers, they see them as synonymous, right? So for us to be able to execute that plan here in North Carolina and then in the nation allows us to really it's mostly language and some cultural barriers that we would have to break down. But that's what the idea would be, is to grow into those things. And keep in mind that beyond just audio content, we're looking at creating experiential content, including augmented reality, video, virtual reality, scavenger hunts. There's the saturation point is a long ways away before we would even, we could grow here nationally for a very long time. Yes, sir?
Where are you building this platform on audio or video?
Great question. So audio is actually the single fastest growing form of media. Podcasts have grown 75% in the past 3 years. So they're growing faster than video. They don't carry the streaming requirements that videos carry. We've also found that videos tend to be very dominating. If you are in a new place and you walk up to somewhere and you're expected to watch a video, that completely consumes your attention, whereas you can listen to audio and it can actually enhance rather than distract and dominate. We think that's a very important piece of the marrying of the real with the physical with the virtual. That's where we want to be. That's our sweet spot.
All right, Paul Hedgecock with UGoTour.